everyone, so this is going to be a video on vaginal births versus repeat C-sections, and by vaginal birth I mean a vaginal birth after cesarean. So basically the reasons why we're choosing to have a VBAC is it's not only safer for me but for the baby, and it's going to be a lot easier of a recovery with not only a baby but a 2-year-old as well, considering I'm not going to have a ton of help. Probably only have help for the first 2 weeks, and then I'm pretty much on my own, which isn't a big deal, I don't mind, but having to recover from a C-section as well as taking care of a baby and a 2-year-old and trying to get, everything done around the house, that's a lot that I don't really want to handle. Not to mention we also live on the 2nd floor, which means there's always stairs to go up, which stairs are not recommended if you've had a C-section, so yeah. Just not something I want to go through again. However, if I have to have a C-section, it's not going to really disappoint me in any way. It's just, I'd rather try for a VBAC first, and then if I have to have a C-section at any point, I'd rather not end up at a pushing stage, or not end up to the pushing stage and then go in for a C-section. So really it's going to be a lot of discussing stuff with not only my doctor but any kind of other doctor that's there in case he can't be there. So I'm going to go over just the general risks of a repeat C-section versus a VBAC. So with a repeat C-section, your usual surgical risks are involved. There's not really anything too much more than that. Surgery-wise, it's surgical risks in general, which could be like hemorrhaging, blood clotting disorders, and I believe it's called bowel entanglement or twisted bowels or something like that. But you could also have any number of other things. Whereas with a VBAC, basically it's a less than 1% chance of your uterus rupturing. But if you really compare that to a first-time mother, it's pretty much the same risk of uterine rupture in general, so really I don't think it's much of a risk. But I'm not a doctor, don't take my advice. Talk to your doctor. Repeat C-section, your hospital stay is usually going to be around 3 to 4 days unless you develop a fever, an infection, anything that they think is bad. You're probably going to be there for up to 4 or 5 days, just to let you know. Whereas the VBAC, typically they'll let you stay for 1 to 2 days. They like to recommend staying longer just because the mother doesn't typically get help a lot at home, so just kind of being in a relaxed state with a new baby and getting all that help that you want / need, they recommend. However, a lot of people, including myself, would like to not stay in the hospital as long. But your average stay for a VBAC is typically 1 to 2 days. Now if you're going to compare infections, basically with a C-section you can have an infection of not only your uterus, your bladder, but also the skin where the incision was made. You can have infections of those places, whereas with a VBAC, typically, yes, you can still get a uterus infection, but you're not going to have multiple layers of infection because you haven't had, any cut open on you. So the risk of infection, pretty much, I guess the only risk of infection doubles for the vaginal birth is if you get to the pushing stage and then you have to end up having a C-section because you're putting too much pressure down there. Let's see, some of the minor risks involved with a C-section could just be, some injury to your bladders, your bladder, your bowels, or to any adjacent organ to your uterus. But again, that comes with just surgery in general. Whereas with a vaginal birth, you could end up with possibly tearing or an episiotomy. Not too big of things if you compare it to actually having your abdomen cut open. The development of blood clots in your legs and your pelvis is increased with a C-section. But after the procedure is done, so not during, it's during recovery, which is basically why they keep those compression socks slash, I don't know, suction things. I don't know, massages your legs, or they keep those on your legs for the first, I believe, day. But yeah, you could have ongoing pain and discomfort, where you had your incision from a C-section, whereas with a vaginal birth, you're just going to have kind of a sore vagina down there, but not anything too bad, obviously, compared to a C-section. You have a small chance that the baby will have respiratory problems with a C-section, basically because during a vaginal birth, any kind of fluid that's in the lungs that, you know, they were practice breathing in gets expelled out through a vaginal birth because they're being squeezed through the canal. But with a C-section, they're just kind of being pulled out, and they don't get that opportunity to get, you know, that, like, I'm not going to say smushed, but they don't get that opportunity to be squeezed out and out of them. Let's see. The big thing I think here in this next one is basically if you plan to have more kids, multiple C-sections kind of pose a problem for you. You have a greater risk of just surgical complications. Once you get to a 4th or 5th cesarean, they become super prominent. You probably are going to end up with a much higher likelihood of complications arising than with just 1 or 2. So they oftentimes recommend you limit to like 2 or 3 cesareans just for that risk of you definitely could lose your uterus. And that's, you could still have to have a hysterectomy if you have a vaginal birth, but it's more likely with a repeat C-section. So basically the bottom line is, I guess, whatever you're comfortable with. However, I know a lot of doctors in general recommend just having a repeat C-section just because it's easier. A lot of them aren't willing to take the risks of a VBAC. My doctor, however, is like super pro VBAC, that our hospital is having a meeting regarding vaginal births after cesareans. With him as kind of like the keynote speaker, I guess, is what he was telling me. The hospital has to have certain standard procedures in place in order for you to even attempt a VBAC. They need to have 24-hour anesthesiologist. They need to have a 24-hour anesthesiologist, just in case, you know, something were to go wrong during your VBAC and you would have to have a C-section. They would like to definitely have someone there on call at all times in case anything happens. Not to mention, you know, you need to have a competent doctor in kind of the aspect of what could happen, who's good under pressure, and things like that. And then I think the last thing my doctor was talking about was, for someone who wants to have a vaginal birth after cesarean, you kind of need everyone on your birth team to be very supportive. And a lot of people aren't technically supportive of vaginal birth after cesarean because there's still that stigma of, well, if you've had 1 C-section, that's all you're kind of going to be able to have. And I think that's totally just, it's not fair, but it's kind of how it is. And I know this turned into a very long, like, rambling type video, but if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them down below. Most of this is coming from my doctor and also the American something pregnancy, AmericanPregnancy.org, Mayo Clinic, and just kind of those type of sites. But anyway, yes, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the comments below. Don't forget to like my video and share it with everybody if you like it. Bye.